While we're giving everyone just 1 minute, please take a look in the chat. There's a link in there for a pre-event survey that we'd love to have you fill out for just a quick second, and take a minute to introduce yourselves. Tell us your name, your business name, and your location.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Well, we're all here then. Let's get started. Welcome to today's webinar. Our focus today revolves around empowering small businesses like you to expand your market reach, scale delivery of your packaged goods. We have a really informative hour lined up to discuss some key strategies and resources that are available in a comprehensive toolkit that we just published. My name is Sarah, and I work here at LISC directly with small businesses all across the country to help them adapt to our new economy. Excuse me. And at LISC, we offer all sorts of resources like cash grants, small business loans, toolkits like this, webinars like this, other partner resources, like a popular online learning platform that we've developed in partnership with Verizon. And we can follow up with some more of that information at the end of our call and in an email as well. This is being recorded, and we will send the recording to everyone, as well as the link to download the toolkit that we're going to review today. And besides myself, you'll hear from 3 other people on the call, my colleagues from Intend, Selena, Brian, and Margot, who did all the amazing hard work of creating the toolkit. I'll ask them to introduce themselves in just a second, but first, want to give some credit to the Kroger Foundation, who made this toolkit and this webinar possible. They've been a great partner of ours, working to strengthen food systems all across the country, and specifically in some historically excluded communities. And Selena and Margot, if you guys want to take over, introduce yourselves and Ryan, then we can officially get started.
Sure thing. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Selena Benya, and it's a pleasure to be here with you all today. Here's our little roadmap for today's conversation and presentation. And we welcome your feedback along with your insights as we navigate. We actually have a couple of interactive polls that we'll be using throughout the session. So there'll be 3 of them that will help us better understand your journey and the work that you are embarking on or have been embarking on as well. So let me take the moment here to introduce my colleagues. As you met Sarah, and I think let me kick it over to Ryan, who was our key expert as it relates to what we're going to walk through today.
Yeah, thank you, Selena. My name is Ryan Saltz. I am a consultant on this project, and I've spent 10 years in the food and beverage industry supporting small business owners. At one point, created the first culinary accelerator in the country, and really have good background on CPG as well as brick and mortar. So just excited to support my food people.
Awesome. We're all a family already. Look at that. Next, we have Margot Slauson. So I'm going to let Margot introduce herself real quick.
Hi, everyone. So glad to have you all joining us here today. We're really excited to present this toolkit to you. My background is also in working with small businesses and business development organizations and helping them launch and sustain successful businesses. So excited to share our knowledge with you today and get your questions answered. Thank you.
So Margot will be fielding the chat as well as the team from LISC as well. So feel free to chime in, as I mentioned. Also, if you could just make sure that we'll be monitoring the mute and unmute, but if you can also just make sure everyone is on mute and came in on mute, so that the quality of the conversation remains at a high level. So just wanted to remind us of that. So we're gonna get started. What product does your business sell and how long have you been in business? So we actually have a Menti here. And if you could go to menti.com, either on your phone, you can also use this QR code and it is going to ask you the same question. And we're going to take a pause here to have you fill it out in terms of what products or products do you sell and how long have you been in business? So I think Margot also put it in the chat as well. So you could either use the chat, the QR code, and or type in menti.com and use the 568288. Cool. Great.
Yeah, this is really great to see a diverse level of experience here, from just starting to handfuls of years in business. So
Right.
the goal of our toolkit is to help you address on kind of all ends of that scale. So really excited to see this background.
Yeah. I'm hungry now, but I'll wait till after. And I love that there are folks who are in the beverage side. It's probably one of the fastest growing segments of CPG. So, this toolkit also comes with some information about the industry that we want to share with you all. It's a strong industry. It's performing well. And the goal of the toolkit as we navigate through this conversation is to be able to help you understand where you're at is good, where you can go and the potential to go. There's some things that we know sometimes are perceived as barriers, but we believe with the right tools and the right resources, you can navigate to growing your business, if that is indeed your intent. So thank you for sharing these. I think these are great. These will be recapped, just so you know, for a later time as well. All right. So part of the toolkit, when we started this journey, both before this project, to be honest with you, in our lives as colleagues, Ryan, Margot, and I, as Ryan mentioned, really understood that food is family, food is culture, food is community. And everyone has different pathways as it's associated with where they're at. And we saw, I'm just starting to 5 years in a vegan wine to cookies. So that whole gamut we experienced through our consultation through a nonprofit organization. And so what we thought best was to approach this as personas. And if you all have attended a marketing session, or if you haven't, personas help us get a sense of like where people are and what are their drivers, what are their potential enablers and barriers, right? And so when we thought about this toolkit, we really thought of these four that are sitting here. One, someone has a really great passion of cakes to empanadas, right? And probably playing around in the kitchen and thinking about what I need to do, to someone who's got a hot sauce that is inspiring, right? And really trying to figure out how do I get to that next level, right? So Xenia, Andre, we've got Sarah, who obviously we know that there are some very delicate people as it relates to food and making sure that the quality of food remains at a high level, right? And thinking about what her next step is after completing an accelerator. And then someone who may take another step from a perspective of non-food. So consumer packaged goods runs a gamut, and really it is about shelf life when we think about what can be produced, or small manufacturing as well when we think about consumer packaged goods. So all of you today, whether you're in a restaurant or you've been packaging and styrofoaming or using a hot glue gun to close out the cookie, we feel you and we know what that looks like. And you technically are manufacturing at a very small scale, which is actually pretty exciting when you think about it. All right. So how is the structure of the toolkit which we're launching? As just with those personas, we also wanted to spend time in thinking, okay, we know folks jump forward, sometimes jump back, sometimes hit, really big and then start kind of dwindling, right? So we know that stages aren't necessarily static is what we mean when we say that. And so you can see here, we've got really 4 stages where you could jump in and kind of do a refresher if you wanted to in starting a CPG business, from product viability, which really kind of drills down into understanding costs and pricing, and really the legal structure, which allows you to grow or fluctuate as you need, to scaling, which is the idea and the notion of I take my recipe that my family loves to I take it to a farmer's market, to I take it to potentially a local retail store as well. We know retail is a scary word sometimes because it's like, how will I? And our job and what we really got excited about was stage 3 and sharing our understanding and navigating how you as CEOs and presidents of your businesses can navigate what may seem uncertain or overwhelming, but is actually about relationships, which then also leads us into developing your network as well, and what that means for you as an owner of a CPG business. So that's our navigation. The beauty of it is when it is published on the LISC website, you'll see here that there's some easy navigation where you can jump around. So you don't have to go through everything in order to get to what you want to see. So we are excited about that feature, mostly so we know your time is precious and we want to respect that as well. So here's another kind of visual as it relates to the stages too. All right, Ryan, you ready?
Let's go.
All right, let's go.
All right, guys. So I think we can start with, I know if you got a chance to read through the personas, Xena, which is one of them, it's kind of in the starting place, right? When you start, this is your chance to test, to figure out if things are working. So a question that I have for you to put in the chat is, how are you, or how did you test your product with potential customers? I always like to make the distinction that ideally these customers are not related to you. So hopefully if you can put that in the chat, we'll take a look at what you have.
Awesome.
Test kitchen, pop-ups, pop-up events. I love that. Festivals, farmers markets. Yep. Dinners. Yeah. Okay, this is great. I love seeing this diversity here. And a lot of these things are items that some people don't think about. So ideally, if you're in participating here too, you can grab some ideas from the chat and maybe possibly use them for yourself. But within our discussion, or within our toolkit that we've developed, we'll have a handful of different ideas that we will show you on how you can get your product viability really tested out and thought through. So what does this really mean being in stage 1? And that really is sort of the testing phase, right? We're looking at the things that can affect your business, the things that you are potentially passing on in order to pursue this business. So opportunity cost, you could do something else with your time. My mom tells me I should get a real job all the time. I'm sure you've probably heard that as a business owner. Despite anything you do, they'll keep telling you to get something else. The real cost associated, the actual cash you're investing in this product, how to do pricing, and whether your pricing is on or correct or not correct. Sometimes that actually is formulaic, and sometimes you do adjustments for the market. And then your growth opportunity, how much you can actually grow with this venture. And that's not to say that you can't keep doing something even if it doesn't scale into the global worldwide market. And so I like to think, and you'll find me to be a little bit jokey, but I like to think that business is bananas. If you are in business, you probably are thinking it's crazy, there's a lot going on. And so I like to think specifically about how we do pricing in terms of bananas. And this is one of the many different tools that we have in this toolkit. So I'll give it a quick overview, right? Assume that you've bought 5 bananas. You want to sell them at the market. You put them in pretty bags. Your total cost for those 5 bananas in the pretty bags, you think is $6.25. You're like, wow, I sell these for $1 a piece. I must be making amazing money. However, when you think about what you're not including, and many entrepreneurs that I know, this is really the pitfall at the very beginning. They're not including their time spent, the travel it takes to get somewhere, the permits involved, the labor, if they had to replace themselves in that market. I hear from many entrepreneurs at the beginning of their journey, especially in food, well, I made it, so I mean, there's no cost to it. Well, unfortunately, that's not true in the reality of growing your business. And so if we attach even some fictional numbers to this case, $5 for the time or the market you spent, the travel per gallon, the labor, $20 per hour. Again, if you're going to need to hire somebody else to do this, very quickly your $6.25 5 bananas turns into something that's even more bananas, much more expensive. And so if we take that, we look at the actual costs, and then we apply a profit margin on top of that, you can see how very quickly the price per banana sold at a market can be in the $40 range. And you think to yourself, well, I guess I'm out of business. I might as well listen to my mom, go get a real job. Well, the reality is there's always going to be a market for variation. And so there's Lamborghinis, there's Priuses, there's mopeds. Somebody may want to buy it, and that's part of this discovery process.
How many of you, just with a raise of hands, have done a similar simulation, but with your product? Just raise your hands. Great. Yeah. And one thing that Ryan is really good at, as you can see, is in terms of there's always changes in a marketplace, right? So just being cognizant to come back to it, that we know we're not in a static economy and prices and things change. So updating it to reflect that, we think is a very important aspect of how often should I do this? Should it be every 60, 90, 120 days as well? This actual example is in the toolkit too. So you'll actually have a whole section just dedicated to this as well. So any questions for Ryan or any immediate reaction? Let's see here. I'm going to look in the, do we have any questions, Margot? No? Cool.
Not yet.
All right. So let's continue then. Thanks, Ryan.
Of course. So as we continue, you know, the organizing stage, this is where you need to get your formalization sort of set up. And ideally investing in that formalization at the beginning really helps prepare you for the long-term future of your business. Many of the mentors that I've involved in food-related programs have said, if you spend the time and effort up front, you'll save yourself the money and headache later. And a lot of the initial steps in this are really thought-driven. So understanding the future of your business is going to help you save a lot of money going forward. But those things that you need to think about, tax IDs, they're free, EINs. Paying your taxes, another one. Some people forget to do that. Hopefully you're not one of them. How many of you know that y'all have the required permits or licenses, or how many people are really unsure? If you want to go ahead and raise your hands on those that have them.
Or let's do a heart. Yeah, there we go. Something.
Okay.
There you go.
Some prepared people. How about people that feel like they don't know what they're doing on permits and licenses? If you want to raise your hands. less people, perhaps. Okay, well, in the toolkit, you'll get direction and where to go on many of these initial company organization steps. Not knowing the answer is not a reason to stop. It's a great reason to ask for help, and we'll get to that as we continue to go forward.
Yeah, I think in terms of just some of the comments as well, I think it's important first just when we think about taxes or licenses, you may think, okay, I'll just keep going, right? So one of the rules that we, and even as small business owners ourselves, is thinking, how much do we set aside for when taxes happen, right? And sometimes when you've been, whether you've been working in a business and or just starting, there are lots of resources that we'll be sharing with you further down that can actually serve as like a Sherpa for you all so that you're not doing this alone, right? So when we think about these, it's like, oh, the approach of all of these forms I have to fill out. There are people in your community that can help, and we reference them in the toolkit as well. So know that there are folks who you can access for free through consultation services that can help you navigate some of these items as well. And the clarity sometimes comes not from reading everything, but also asking the right questions, right? And sometimes we need help in even creating those questions. So what you've said here in the chat, just, know you're not alone, but there are also solutions that can help guide you.
Yeah, and I also want to represent that, CPG can manifest in a number of different ways. It's not all food, right? So sometimes I saw somebody ask earlier in the chat if we were going to address Department of Agriculture or maybe USDA. You're right. As you scale up, there are a number of agencies that you probably don't know about that you need to figure out whether or not there are implications from. So number one, we have a lot of that built into the toolkit, but then number two, always a great chance to ask questions and connect with resources.
Totally. And you all are just crushing it in the chat as well. So we'll make sure to also follow up on that as well. So we've got a poll for you again. Where do you make your product? So I'm going to click over to this next one. I'm going to start my Menti and let's see what happens here. Again, with this, you can either use the QR code. Margot has also put it in the chat, and or you can use menti.com with the code sitting right here. This is great. We've got a real blend here, Ryan. Coming in hot. Oh, out of makerspace too. Cool.
Yeah, this is fantastic. I mean, it really follows the trajectory that I've seen before. So in some cities, in some states, you're really able to go pretty far starting in your home before you need to invest in a bigger space or a manufacturing facility or commercial kitchen. And then again, that investment to get to broader retail distribution or just having more products made can be heavy. So we do get into that as well in this toolkit.
Yeah, these are great. Thank you for sharing. I hope that if you are in the chat and you see someone put something that you don't know, ping them is what I would say. In case you're like, hey, what does that even mean? Or what does a shared commercial kitchen look like? A lot of these things are also done by us working together or meeting up like this. And we'll talk a little bit more about that too.
Yeah. And so as we think about scaling, right, I just mentioned, and I'm sure many of you that have already made this investment have seen how expensive scaling up can be, right? When you are thinking about it, sometimes it's a matter of adapting your product. You make it a certain way in order to make it for a mass audience, sometimes that requires scaling your production, which means changing the recipe to meet the demands or to meet the types of equipment that you need. You also really need to understand whether or not there's actually that push and pull, that supply and demand from your audience in order to scale up. Because if you invest too much up front, you risk the issue of the market not being there, and then you've accidentally ended up in a predicament where you've invested a lot, and ideally you're not going to close down or go into bankruptcy, but that's what we want to prevent, right? I always say, I want you to be in business for as long as you want to be in business. So if you want to make any decisions on closing, that should be your choice. In this toolkit, we discuss a lot of that, including your branding, knowing when to hire, and some of these pros and cons as well.
Yeah, we actually did a survey where of many who may have participated on this call. And so this toolkit reflects some of those specific issues where we know the amount of effort of marketing and branding is critical, but is also foundational for so many other steps that as you look through and navigate through stage 2, you'll learn more about. But we also know that this whole notion of scaling requires some serious thinking. Ryan, I'll kick it back to you.
Yeah. So when I think of scale, I think of a couple of different avenues you can go through. You can do it in-house or you can do it outsource, in-source, outsource. The great parts about doing it in your own facility, in-sourcing, is that you have the control over what you do. You have the ability to control your facility. You have more flexibility if you so choose in your production. But when you decide to invest in that, it's extremely high cost. So usually that might be specific equipment. It might be specific real estate that you have to open up into. And then also all of the worries of how to pay for all of that, right? So really understanding whether your market is there is very important. On the outsourcing part, many people think about this as the best way to scale. Oh, I'll find somebody else that can make my product. However, the issue with that is usually there are minimums that you need to meet. The expense that you put into those minimums also goes back to whether or not there's a market. If you invest a lot into a salsa that doesn't have a market and then it all goes bad, we're in a bad position again. So sometimes the other cons of that are that there aren't makers for the type of thing that you're trying to do. So weighing those costs associated and the understanding of whether you should do something in your own means or farm it to somebody else that can do that is a very particular topic, and we go through that in the toolkit.
And Ryan is probably leaving out the most important part, which is you have to make peace with yourself on that decision. And what does that mean? It usually means you potentially are going to partner with something that you created, right? And at the same time, it requires you to think through the ownership aspect and the quality aspect and potentially compromising to achieve scale, right? So we recognize that there's some tactics here, but as founders and as creators, it also requires this business strategy, not just the creator strategy around thinking about growing your business. And so we do talk about that as well.
So very similar to bananas, right? I always think about how people brand themselves when they scale. And when you start out, it's really cute to be that handmade grandma's grape jelly. But what happens when grandma's grape jelly decides we're going to open up an entire line of condiments, right? Well, grandma's grape jelly barbecue sauce doesn't sound awful. It actually probably might be pretty good. But grandma's grape jelly mayonnaise sounds pretty bad, and nobody's going to buy that. And when we see this manifest truthfully in the market, what you choose to name yourself, the design guidelines you set early on will help influence the expenses that, again, you have going forward. And so it's important to think through some of these things as you're scaling, as you're starting. Where do I want this to be? How is it going to grow? what are the choices that I'm making? You know, if we decide to make the product purple like grape, well, what happens if I decide to do red grapes tomorrow, right? Are people going to understand and relate those back to your brand? And your brand, at the end of the day, is what you're building, what you're selling. The reason people come back to you is they have familiarity with you. And so understanding these pitfalls are just as difficult, but oftentimes spending that upfront time, money, thought into how this grows and develops will save you money and help you explore and project your brand for customers to find and purchase ongoing.
Yeah, and I liken it to what we just talked about as well, right, Ryan, in terms of like when you're testing it, right? How married are you to grandma, right? And everyone loves grandma, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, well, my grandma was kind of mean. But anyway, so in terms of like just being open, right, and thinking beyond your core, you know, family or friends and family approach can save you money down the line. Because what we've seen is someone does this and their products evolve. And I say they started with one product, they moved to 3 products like seen here. And this then creates a quagmire and an additional expense associated with having to rethink this. So if you've been through this process and have had to backtrack and then move forward, we feel you. But if you haven't, it's something to think about in terms of just the navigation. And this would also take you back, and this is why we said, you know, we know stages are fluid because it also goes back to, you know, did you test your brand, right? Did you test your product in the community?
I like to think specifically for that about the product Newman's Own, right? If it was Newman's salad dressing, well, when he started making pizza and started making all these other products, I don't think anybody would have understood what was going on.
Yeah, that's right. So we've got another question for you. How did or will you fund the growth of your business? So start the Menti here and see how it's going. So as you answer this, this was probably the biggest response in terms of like understanding people's concerns about being able to grow their business. And we, as former folks in the field of finance and business education, we really want to be able to recognize and hold the importance of money, right? So you're obviously in business to make money. And we wanted to make sure that we spent some time in terms of navigating. There are also tons of resources associated with actually accessing capital, including LISC, which is on the call too. What's going on here?
We'll talk about bootstrapping shortly. I see that in the chat, but yeah, I know that it looks like there's a pretty good, at least in the chat, diversity of interest here. So, or
you want to read some of those out? Ryan?
Yeah, we have looks like bootstrapping, grants, profits, which is great. That's a great way to grow. I don't see many in the venture space, but bank loans I did see come up once. So, oh, okay. No, I did see one venture here. There we go. If you could see the chart, it would probably follow what I'm reading here. So,
okay. Let's see here. I'm restarting it so that we get it going. And let's see if you can try it again, guys. Let's see. Margot, do you see it working on your end?
No, and I'm trying to open it in our Menti app, and that one particular slide is seeming to get stuck.
It says that the responding is off.
Yeah, and I just turned it back on. Well, at least we got 2, but we'll capture these here and repopulate it. So I'm going to continue us on our journey. Thanks, Margot, for confirming. I just wanted to make sure it's not you, it's me, folks. Well, let's talk a little bit about what this means. Can you see my screen again?
We're still on the Menti slide, Selena.
Okay, thanks. So let me just reshare. All right. Here we go.
Great.
So part of the journey, as we know, is where you navigate related to your financials. We're not going to spend a lot of time because we know there's resources, and we're actually going to share those resources for you to better understand as it relates to accessing capital. And so thank you for sharing bootstrapping, savings. All of these things are what create, obviously, a field. And so what we did here is we created this table really for you to think through. And some of this language I just want to walk through in terms of you have financing options. And on the left side, there's features. And there's features so that you can make a business decision, right? You should be in the driver's seat as it relates to the cost of capital or how much ownership potentially people can take into your business, right? And so Ryan, Margot, and I have seen, I've helped 12 people sign one loan for a product to where it's been one person that is on their own and uses their own financing and their own savings to bring in equity. So what is debt? Debt is something that you typically will receive a loan, right? You'll have a term, so a time frame, and a cost associated with that, right? And so when we think about financing options, we think about what type of money is it? In venture capital, there's a lot of different structures, but the most one I would say is where someone is going to invest and take ownership into your business and also reap the benefits of profit. So there's an association of there's more that you're giving in order to receive from a venture capital perspective. And typically they're more aggressive in terms of producing success, right? So in a term loan, meaning a bank loan or a CDFI loan, you potentially go in for 2, 3, 5 years for a loan of say $30,000, right? Whereas in equity, typically it's a smaller window, expecting a higher return because they're helping you grow at a very quick rate. And then the third one is bootstrapping. And we work with several people who have gone through this pathway. And we recognize it then puts you in control, but at the same time, the acceleration portion is really slow. And the reason why we put this here is because this is where most people start. But it's also important to know when you start here, you also have to think about the future. And if you use all your dollars to bootstrap and then have potentially an opportunity to access a bigger market, and you've depleted your resources, it makes it hard to move into the other options. And you all probably know this because you've experienced this. I've experienced this myself in terms of like, I'm using my own money, but oh, I've got a big contract and now I need to figure out how I'm going to finance. So we put this together, again, thinking the features are about you owning and understanding the options that are presented here as well. Ryan, do you have anything you want to add to this?
Yeah, I just I see a lot of discussion of grants, and I think like that is a very unique proposition. In fact, I would say pre-COVID, the idea that grants for business existed was probably very fictional. I don't know how long grants will continue forward, but definitely as they revolve around business, the most common point of reference is that they are competitive. And so they're never a guarantee. Sometimes that funding can be available, but it is a little bit of a needle in a haystack. So sometimes some of these other methods can be more productive in the meantime. That's not to say you shouldn't pursue free money. You should always do it, but you have to weigh that opportunity cost.
Yeah, I think and when we think about the competitiveness, just like in the marketplace, right? All of the things that make you a compelling business, right? You have to think about your brand, your pathway, your story, and all of those play a role in accessing that needle, right? So I think there is still space for it. You could also leverage a grant if you do receive it for more money. If you don't have equity or a nest or retirement, you could actually use that grant because it's free money and think about leveraging it with other sources of money as well. So we're happy to talk more about that. I don't want to confuse folks, so I'm going to move us along in terms of thinking about getting into retail, which we were really excited to share with you. So I'll kick this over to Ryan.
Yeah. So retail, I think it's a pretty difficult one, but in the chat, if you can, if you are a retailer, if you happen to be in this room, what are you looking for from most of your retailers? And then if you're looking to get into retail, if you can put in the chat, what questions that you have about selling your product in retail. Getting to the decision maker, that's a pretty big one, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right, labeling, shelf life extending, wholesale pricing, how to get people to buy. These are all really great problems. I hate to say problems, but yeah, some of them are solvable. I see a lot that are labels and packaging. Some of them are more difficult, right? And we do go through that. Getting to the right decision makers, we talk a little bit about that process, specifically finding the category manager, how to have the discussion with them, what they're looking for. A lot of that is listed out in the toolkit. And so each area of the country is a little different, but we do go through that. And I'm really hopeful that this information is supportive for your journey, because I know that it's been supportive for many of the entrepreneurs that we've worked with in food.
Yeah, I think in terms of also just kind of reading through this, when you are in stage 1 and stage 2 and thinking about your packaging, because I see a lot about shelf life, Ryan, it really is about taking the time to test. Ryan has a great example where one of our clients gave them a soda and 2 days later it exploded.
Yeah.
That was just their first round, right? But it takes time to get the right magic, right? Meaning, how long should shelf life look like? What is the viability of something existing over a period of time? And is it, gonna survive an office space with an eager person wanting to drink soda? So I just want to say that there are some folks, and we do have a section on that, but it is important to test that even before you potentially get to retailers.
And a lot of times, just to address some of these ones that I think are solvable, right? Nutritional testing, shelf life testing, those are all things that you can go and identify a consultant to do for you. Sometimes that's even done by the state administration. So definitely looking through the toolkit. Oftentimes there are locals. For example, in Texas, you go to the Texas AgriLife Extension, and they'll help you with your shelf life testing.
So let's continue on to stage 3.
Yeah, so in stage 3, this is where we get to the sort of meat and potatoes of the getting into retail and the true kind of nuts and bolts of food and retailing overall. So what are the retailers' goals? How to do wholesale pricing? How do you approach them? Merchandising, another one that's kind of constantly overlooked. Slotting fees. If you didn't know, now you know. Basically, you have to sometimes pay to be on the shelf, and that's almost like renting your spot on the shelf in order to sell, which is unique and different and may not be something that you knew before. But as you go into retail, sometimes these are things that you have to understand and account for in your pricing. So, yeah, I think on this part, so that, when we think about getting into resources, outside of the resources of specificity, I'd love to know what resources have been helpful to you, and if you could put them in the chat, or what would you recommend to others? And I already see many of those things coming through the chat, or have been.
Yeah, and there's some great questions associated with persistency of, it sounds like some folks have not been able to get hold of people. So our information is available post this, and we're happy to visit with you all. Certifications have a range of opportunities. It depends on your state and local, to be honest with you. I love it. Someone's using ChatGPT. Great. These are important. Margo, are you getting some of these in? Yeah. Just kind of reading through some of these. So a lot of folks are doing resource finding informally, which tells me you're innovative, committed, and probably have time sensitivity to what you need to get done. And we created a list that we can share with you all as it relates to thinking through who. But even those of you on this, you can see the power of just being in a room like this with people's comments and sharing. And so while we know that you're working on the business, we also have seen the power of connecting with community to help build your brand and to help you get into other rooms that you are aiming to get to. And so we believe, and we know everyone has a spectrum of introvert to extrovert, right? So we like to think of it as it's part of your plan in order to grow your business, that networking and connecting with people and organizations should be part of your strategy. Why is that? Is because we typically have a very limited marketing budget. But even then, it usually ends up being about relationship-based conversations and being in the context of a room that everyone is trying to do something, right? So as Ryan mentioned, there's actually a lot of informal CPG groups, and we highly encourage you, wherever you are, to Google CPG groups, because those can be very powerful. They connect you not only with manufacturing, but tips and solutions, and retailers actually show up too. And so we put together a very long list, but mostly so that, first of all, when you think about resources, there are things that are free that can help you. But mostly it takes some time in terms of sharing information to get into the door with them. However, when you're in the door with them, typically there's free or low cost. And so using the solutions of Canva, ChatGPT, YouTube, all of those are important. And we do not dismiss them because, I mean, I use them daily. However, we also think some of these can assist you and help you navigate some decisions, especially if they're costly decisions, right? We want you to tap into resources that are going to help you make good decisions, but also that potentially reduce your costs associated with success as well. So accessing the toolkit and other resources from LISC. We are now at our end of the session. And so, Margo, what does next steps look like in accessing the toolkit and other resources from LISC?
Yeah, I'm going to pass it over to Sarah on our LISC team, and she's going to share a little bit with you all about resources that we'll share post-webinar. I'm also going to drop in the chat box information and link about the Verizon Small Business Program. Sarah, do you want to share with them what that program entails?
Yeah, this is another resource that we've come together with a great partner. Like Kruger has been a great partner for us on this toolkit and this webinar. Verizon has been another great partner of ours, and they have an online learning platform. It's completely free, and you can sign up and navigate through a whole handful of different courses for all different stages of your business, no matter where you're at, if you're just getting started or if you've been around for 20 years. Also, right now, from time to time, they do offer grants. I know Ryan was talking about that before. I think they are offering a grant. Again, it's like a little bit of a needle in a haystack. It's not really the primary part of the program, but it is nice that when there's an opportunity to apply for one, maybe you can use some of that money to help sort of supplement what you're learning on the platform or some things that you've learned today in this webinar. So I think that grant period closes on the 28th. So check it out if you're interested. But yes, we will be following up with a recording of this webinar. It'll be made available to you all. We'll email it to you in the coming week, along with some links to some other resources, list lending resources, that webinar I was just telling you, or the platform I was just telling you about, the recording to this webinar. And if you have any other questions or are looking for any other resources or want to connect again with Selena or Ryan or Margot, we can help with that too. You can email smallbusinessservices@lisk.org, and we can always help direct you to other resources that we know about or potentially connect you with a BDO in your area. And if there's any other specific topics, I saw some messages in the chat that this was a really great webinar. So that's wonderful feedback to hear. We will put in a post webinar survey too that we'd like for you to fill out. And if there's any other topics for things that you want to know about in the future, we want to hear about that too.
Well, we know your time is precious, so we also wanted to make this as timely as possible. And thank you, Lisk team, for trusting us. Thank you all for joining us today and listening to Ryan and I talk shop. As Sarah mentioned, if you'd like to get a hold of us, Sarah can connect you and we can have other conversations beyond this as well. Thank you, everyone. Be well.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.